Welcome to the deep dive. You know, the world of international finance, it's always moving, always shifting. Countries are constantly looking for that edge, that unique position. And today we're looking at a really interesting move by Nepal, their International Financial Transactions Act. People often just call it the IFT Act. We've got some detailed class notes here, so we're going to use those to really get under the hood of this thing. Our mission today, to unpack how Nepal is trying to position itself, strategically, mind you, as an international financial transactions center. We'll look at the mechanisms, what's actually in place, and maybe most importantly, what does this all mean for global finance players, sure, but also for you if you're trying to understand how global economics works today.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating, I think, is just how proactive Nepal's being here. It's quite sophisticated. This act, it isn't just, another regulation. It feels like a statement, a real signal about how they see economic development, globalization. It really sets the scene for how a developing nation is trying to carve out this very specific, almost protected space in the global financial world.
Okay, so with that big picture in mind, let's dive into the specifics, the nuts and bolts. What were the main goals? Why did Nepal even bring in this IFT Act?
Right. Well, it seems to stand on sort of two legs, two main objectives. First, and they state this pretty clearly, it's about developing Nepal as a center for these international financial transactions. The goal behind that is national economic development. And you have to see this within their broader policy context. They've been pushing open, liberal, market-based policies. And they see the way financial markets are globalizing.
Okay, so attract the business for development. Makes sense. What's the second leg?
The second part is about control. It's regulating and managing the activities of these international financial entities once they actually set up shop in Nepal. So this is dual thing, attract the business, but manage it carefully. It's quite nuanced for a developing country. They're not just opening the floodgates. They seem very aware of needing to protect their own domestic system, avoiding volatility, illicit money, lessons learned elsewhere perhaps.
Right, that dual approach. Attract the capital, foster development, but keep it contained. So how does this specific strategy, this act, really connect to Nepal's bigger economic ambitions? It sounds like they want a very particular kind of finance kept separate.
Exactly. That's a good way to put it. They're trying to use their location, their policy space, to bring in foreign money and expertise, but in this very controlled, almost like a ring-fenced zone. The idea is growth, yes, but without those specific activities directly mixing it to the domestic market. It's a very deliberate attempt to build a kind of offshore-style hub. Attractive, but secure.
Okay, that framing helps a lot. So thinking about who fits into this model, before we get into the operations, who are they actually targeting or regulating? And you mentioned this earlier, but let's nail down this term, person resident of Nepal. Why is that definition so critical here? Ah, yes, that's absolutely foundational. It's the bedrock for the whole structure, really. So, person resident of Nepal. It includes Nepalese citizens, obviously, unless they're living abroad for work or business beyond a certain time. It also includes non-Nepalese citizens who are living in Nepal for work or business, again, beyond a prescribed period. And crucially, any company or entity that's registered in Nepal under their existing laws. That's also a person resident of Nepal.
Got it.
And getting this definition right is key because, as we'll see, it determines who these international entities are strictly forbidden from doing business with. It creates that clear line in the sand between the international activities and the domestic economy.
Okay, crystal clear on the definitions. Now, who's in charge of making all this happen? The key players. You mentioned there are two main committees. Let's start with the first one, the Accreditation Committee. How's that put together? Who's on it? Right, the Accreditation Committee. Its office is actually located within the Nepal Rastra Bank, which is Nepal's central bank. Its main job, essentially, is granting the licenses to these international financial entities and then, importantly, regulating what they do. The chairperson is the governor of the Nepal Rastra Bank, the head of the central bank. Then the members include the secretary from the Ministry of Finance, the secretary from the Ministry of Law, Justice, and Parliamentary Affairs, plus two independent experts nominated by the government. One has to be a chartered accountant and the other an economist.
Ah, independent experts too.
Yes, and those nominated members, they serve for 2 years. So you get this mix, right? Key government ministries ensuring alignment, plus that independent financial and economic perspective, which is pretty vital if you're trying to build credibility for a new financial center.
That does sound like a solid mix of oversight.
Okay.
So what are their main powers? What does this accreditation committee actually do day to day? What's their role?
Their mandate is pretty wide-ranging. First, they're constantly monitoring and supervising the companies that have licenses, making sure they're playing by the rules, following the act, other laws. They also have a role in suggesting improvements. They can make recommendations to the other committee, the promotion board, about maybe offering better facilities or even changing laws to make Nepal, more attractive.
So proactive as well.
Exactly. They check that entities are meeting their license conditions, they can give instructions, and, this is important, they have the power to suspend or even revoke a license.
Okay, that's significant power.
It is. But there's a key check. Before they can suspend or revoke, the entity has to be given a proper chance to explain itself. Due process. Oh, and one other detail, any fees or charges the committee collects, that goes straight into Nepal's consolidated fund, the main government treasury. So it's transparent where the money goes.
Okay, so that's the regulatory side, the oversight. But you mentioned another body, the promotional one, the International Financial Transactions Promotion Board. What's its setup and goal?
Yes, the promotion board. Its whole purpose is basically to champion this initiative, to promote these international financial activities, and really push forward the goal of making Nepal a recognized center. And you can see its importance by who chairs it. The minister, or state minister of finance. That's top-level government buy-in.
Definitely signals importance.
Yeah, and the members are also very high level. You've got the chairperson of the Finance Committee from the House of Representatives, the vice chair of the National Planning Commission, the NRB governor again, the secretaries from Finance and Law again, plus another government-nominated expert, this time someone with specific financial transaction experience, also for a 2-year term. And the Director General of the Department of Industries acts as the member secretary.
Wow, that's a lot of senior people involved.
It is. And get this, the Act actually mandates that all government agencies have to cooperate with both the promotion board and the accreditation committee. It raises that question, why such high-level backing? It really underlines that this is seen as a national strategic priority, not just some side project.
That level of coordination is pretty striking. So beyond just promoting, what are the promotion board's main jobs? What else do they handle?
Well, they frame the actual policies for promotion. They work with the government on any new laws or changes needed. They coordinate between all the different players, government, non-government, international groups. They also make specific recommendations to the government about things like tax exemptions, special facilities, concessions, basically, the carrots to attract these international firms.
Okay, the incentives.
Exactly. And crucially, they act as the appeal body. If the accreditation committee decides to suspend or revoke a license, the company can appeal that decision to the promotion board.
Ah, so there's a review process, an appeal mechanism.
Precisely. It builds in a system of checks and balances. It means the accreditation committee doesn't have the final, unchallenged say on something as serious as taking away a license. Ensures fairness.
That structure, with checks and balances, makes a lot of sense. Okay, let's switch gears. Imagine you're one of these international financial companies. You're interested. What's the actual process? How do you get a license in Nepal under this act?
Okay, the practical steps. An interested entity needs to apply to the accreditation committee. There's a prescribed fee they have to pay with the application. Then the committee looks into it. They conduct an inquiry, check everything out. If they're satisfied, that the entity meets the criteria, fits the goals of the act, they'll issue the license. And that license will come with specific terms and conditions attached.
And if not?
If they decide not to issue the license, they have to inform the applicant and explain why.
Okay. Are there specific hurdles these companies have to clear just to even apply, like minimum requirements? It can't be just anyone, right?
No, definitely not just anyone. There are clear prerequisites laid out in the Act. First, the entity has to be properly registered as a financial entity in another country outside Nepal.
Okay. Established elsewhere first.
Yes. And importantly, it needs a track record. It must have been actively involved in international financial transactions for at least 3 years. So this filters for established, experienced players, not startups.
Right. Experience matters.
Absolutely. And the accreditation committee can also ask for any other information, details, documents they think they need during that vetting process. They have broad authority to dig deeper if needed.
So you get through the process, you get the license, is that it? Or are there ongoing things you need to do?
No, it's not a one-off. The license needs to be renewed every single year.
Every year?
Every year. You have to pay the renewal fees annually to keep the license active. It ensures that there's continuous oversight and that companies remain in good standing.
Okay, yearly renewal. Got it. Now, this is maybe the really interesting part for listeners. What kinds of international financial companies are actually allowed to get these licenses? Is Nepal focused on just banking, or is it broader?
Oh, it's much broader. They seem to be casting a very wide net, actually. It suggests they want a pretty diverse financial ecosystem there. The Act lists quite a range. You've got the more traditional ones like foreign banks and trust companies, international insurance and reinsurance companies.
Standard stuff.
Right. But then it gets more varied. It includes companies that basically serve as registered offices for other foreign companies, international holding companies, investment companies, even administrative or regional offices set up by foreign companies.
So back office functions too?
Potentially, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And international trading companies, international finance companies, foreign mutual funds, international leasing companies, international merchant banks, and even international financial firms, providing services like stockbroking, underwriting, investment advice, pension fund advice.
Wow, that is a broad list, from banking to insurance to investment funds to advisory.
It really is. It suggests they're not just trying to attract one type of business. They're aiming for a multifaceted hub that can handle lots of different kinds of international financial flows and services.
That ambition is clear. Okay, so to make this whole distinct offshore model work, the Act must also draw some very clear lines about what these licensed entities cannot do in Nepal, right? To maintain that separation we talked about, what are the big don'ts?
Absolutely. These restrictions are, you could argue, the heart of the strategy. They define that ring fence. So number one, licensed entities are strictly forbidden from buying or owning any kind of immovable property land, buildings inside Nepal.
No real estate.
Okay. Number two, they cannot carry out any type of international financial transaction with any person resident of Nepal. That definition we discussed earlier, this is where it really bites. Complete separation from domestic transactions.
That's a hard line.
It is. Number three, they can't buy shares or debentures of any company that's incorporated in Nepal. No investing in local businesses. And generally, number four, they're not allowed to open an account in any Nepalese commercial bank.
No local bank accounts. How do they operate day to day?
There's one very specific, very narrow exception to that last rule. They can open one account, but only for day-to-day administrative expenses, like paying local staff or office rent. And even then, they need special permission from the accreditation committee. And there's a limit on how much money can be in that account.
Okay, a tiny exception for operational necessity.
Exactly. But the overall picture is clear. These restrictions are designed to ensure these international entities operate through Nepal, maybe in a designated zone, but absolutely not within Nepal's main domestic economy or financial system.
That really hammers home the offshore concept. Okay, those are some pretty strict don'ts.
Yeah.
What about the do's? What's the flip side? What protections or freedoms does Nepal offer to make this attractive, despite those limitations?
Right, because you need incentives too. And the Act does provide some pretty strong, attractive protections. First, there are zero restrictions on licensed entities bringing in the foreign currency they need for their approved international financial transactions.
Free inflow of capital.
Correct. And crucially, existing Nepalese foreign exchange laws. They basically don't apply to these licensed entities when it comes to their authorized international dealings. They operate under a separate forex regime, in effect.
That's a big deal. Freedom from exchange controls?
Huge. Then there's repatriation. They are explicitly allowed to take their foreign currency back out, profits, capital, whatever they brought in or earned through their licensed activities.
Free outflow too. But is there any catch?
There is one very important caveat to repatriation. Any money or assets that came from illicit or illegal activities, like money laundering or funding crime, that cannot be repatriated. They're trying to ensure it's legitimate business.
Okay, an anti-money laundering check. Makes sense. What else?
Security. The Act explicitly states that the capital or property of a licensed entity cannot be nationalized. That provides significant protection against political risk.
Protection against government seizure. That's major for investors.
Absolutely. And then there's secrecy. This is a big one. The Accreditation Committee is legally required to maintain strict secrecy about all the documents and information they hold regarding these licensed entities. They cannot be forced to hand over that information, not even to a court or an investigative body in Nepal.
Wow, very strong secrecy. Is there any exception to that?
Yes, one very specific, very serious exception. If there's strong evidence, sufficient grounds, to prove that documents or information are directly linked to illicit narcotic drugs or legal arms and ammunition dealing, then, and only then, a court can order the production of that information, but only if requested by the official prosecuting authority.
So a very high bar, limited to major transnational crime like drugs and weapons.
Exactly. Outside of that very narrow window, the confidentiality is meant to be ironclad.
Okay, so putting it all together, You've got these really strict rules keeping them out of the domestic economy, but paired with these really strong protections: capital freedom, no nationalization, intense secrecy. What kind of financial hub are they trying to build here? It sounds incredibly specific.
It really does. It aims to create this highly specialized, very secure, and discrete environment for international financial transactions. The restrictions are there to shield Nepal's own economy, protect stability, prevent dodgy dealings domestically, while the protections offer exactly what certain types of international capital value most: stability, freedom of movement for their funds, and confidentiality. It seems designed to attract legitimate international finance that prioritizes privacy and operational freedom, all operating within a framework that has clear legal backing and, as we saw, strong national commitment.
Right. So we've really dug deep into Nepal's International Financial Transactions Act today. We've looked at those ambitious goals, the powerful committees running the show, how companies actually get licensed, and maybe most critically, those clear boundaries, the significant don'ts that fence off the domestic market, and the really robust don'ts that protections, especially that secrecy element designed to lure that specific kind of foreign capital.
Yeah, and if you step back and look at the bigger picture, it's just a really interesting case study, isn't it? How a developing nation tries to strategically find its own niche in this massive global financial system. It
Yeah.
shows a very sophisticated attempt to get the benefits of foreign capital and global integration, but maybe without some of the risks to domestic financial stability that others have faced.
Yeah, definitely. So thinking about this unique mix, the tight restrictions on one hand, the powerful protections on the other, what kinds of international financial activities do you, our listener, think this framework is really aiming to attract? And maybe how could this kind of model, this specific balancing act, potentially influence how other developing countries try to build their own financial hubs in the future? That's something to chew on after our deep dive today.